Excited to have all of you with us this evening. If you missed my comment in the chat box, would greatly appreciate anyone who can pop into your chat box and let me know what sections you want to focus on tonight. I'm going to start with contracts. We've talked several times on these sessions about how important it is to master contracts, as it will be the largest single section on your entire real estate exam and serves as a foundation to so many of the other sections. So if we understand contracts well, we put ourselves in the best position to succeed in the with the real estate exam. So I'm seeing, what do we have? Financials from Kit, excellent. And if anyone is not in a position to type but wants to throw something in the chat box, or excuse me, just unmute and let me know which section you want. We'll probably get to probably 3 of them tonight. And so want to make sure we get to the ones that are going to be most valuable and most important to you. As we do each week, would really love to have as much participation as possible. I know some folks are maybe still at the office or on their way home or whatever, but the way we do these, I'm going to read a question and then I'll read you all of the available answers. And I just need you to put A, B, C, or D into the chat box, depending on which answer you think it is. And then from there, we'll get a sense of what the group knows, or maybe we need to explore a little bit further. So without any further ado, let's dive right into contracts. Question number 1, Ben is not quite ready to purchase, so he rents a home with the option to purchase after 2 years. This option to purchase is an example of a blank contract. Is it A, unilateral, B, bilateral, C, promise and exchange, or D, mutual? A, B, C, or D? All right.
Is it B?
Seeing some A's and B's. It's actually going to be A. So options are unilateral contracts. And what that means, and the thing that we want to understand about this, is that when it comes time for the option to be exercised, as they say, it's one person's decision, right? So it is a unilateral decision. Ben, as the renter, has the option to purchase the home. Because it's already been sorted out that he can't purchase the home after 2 years, he's the only decision maker in this equation. So one decision maker, unilateral, like a unicycle has 1 tire. Bilateral means 2 decision makers, like a bicycle has 2 tires. So anytime that there is an option involved in a contract, that is going to be a unilateral contract. Question number 2, broker Alice conveys an offer from her client to broker Betty, wherein Alice's client wishes to purchase a 300-acre farm by giving broker Betty's client $100,000, 2 one-year-old tractors, and 50 head of Black Angus cattle. What would the consideration offered by broker Alice's client be called? Would it be A, good, B, good and valuable, C, valuable, or D, inadequate? All right, seeing C's flood the chat box, that's going to be correct. Good consideration is not enough to form a contract, right? Good is things like love and affection, or love and affection are probably the best examples. So good consideration is not enough, and whether or not it is good and valuable, good is irrelevant in this equation, right? So we want valuable consideration to form a contract. And in this case, because these items hold value, right? They have a worth. $100,000 has worth. The tractors have worth. The cattle has worth. They're all considered valuable, and so that is how you would consider the consideration. Question number 3, Dave is told by his lender that his debt ratio exceeds the limits set by the FHA. Dave was hoping to get financing through the FHA because he only has 5% to put down. On his way back to the apartment, Dave sees a sign in the yard, rent to own, credit problems okay. Which agreement is the best fit for Dave? A, a life estate, B, a purchase agreement, C, a lease with the option to purchase, or D, a net lease? So this is going to be a similar iteration of the first question for him in this situation, because he doesn't have enough capital to put down and his debt ratio exceeds the FHA limits. He would need to enter into a lease with an option to purchase, which at a later date he could either have his debt ratio sorted out or have more to put down. So C is going to be the correct answer there. Question number 4, John, a buyer, makes an offer on Mary's home. Mary feels the offer is too low and makes a counteroffer. John is not interested in paying any more than his original offer, so he doesn't reply to Mary's counteroffer. 2 weeks later, Mary's desperate to sell and calls John to accept his original offer. Does John have to purchase Mary's home at his original offer price? A, no, John has no obligation to purchase. B, no, too much time has passed before Mary accepted. C, yes, he is bound by the original offer that Mary has now accepted. Or D, yes, as long as he has the original offer. All right, everyone throwing an A in the chat, and that is correct. John has no obligation to purchase. When you counteroffer, when a client counteroffers, it kills the first offer. That offer is terminated, it's null and void. It cannot be accepted unless the buyer offers it again, in which this case, John may or may not, but he is not obligated to purchase that home at the original price if he has found a different home, changed his mind, whatever. When she counteroffers, the counteroffer is a 2-step process. One, it is a rejection of the initial offer, which terminates it, and then putting forth a second entirely separate offer. All right, the basic requirements for an offer include A, subjective intent to contract, B, neither objective intent nor subjective intent to contract, C, both objective and subjective intent to contract, or D, objective intent. All right, seeing a lot of C's in there. Cole with a question mark. It's actually going to be D. So when it comes to subjective, means it's subject to someone's opinion. When we're talking about real estate contracts and offers, they have to have objective intent around what property is being purchased at what price, on what timeline, right? So in an offer, the intent requirement concerned with what a person says or does, objective intent, rather than what the person is actually thinking, which is subjective intent. It's rules based on how a reasonable person could interpret a serious expression of intent. So objective means everybody would look at it and agree upon it, and wouldn't need to understand the inner workings of any party subjectively. All right, a home buyer wishes to make an offer on a home, but has little money. On the contract, he puts down $0 as earnest money. Which of the following is true? A, the minimum earnest money must be at least 1% of the offering price. B, even if the seller signs the contract, the buyer is not bound to it. C, the contract is not valid without earnest money. Or D, the contract, when signed by the seller, is fully enforceable. Right, the D's have it. That's correct. There is no earnest money requirement from an amount standpoint, although in practice, it's a very good idea. You know, if it's not sending an offer with earnest money could demonstrate to a seller that you are not serious or your client's not serious, but it is not required by law to include any earnest money. All right, question number 7. A buyer and seller agreed to all terms of a contract. Both have signed the document. One party would now like to make a change. How can we legally do this? A, it can be changed by mutual agreement in writing by both parties. B, it can be changed by a unilateral codicil from either party. C, it can be changed by written agreement of the buyer and the buyer's attorney. Or D, it cannot be changed in any way. What happens when we get under contract? We might get under contract and say, hey, you know, we originally scheduled the closing date for Thanksgiving Day. That's not going to work. We need to update this contract. And the A's in the chat box have it. Contract can be modified by mutual agreement of both the buyer and the seller. You can do this on the very same contract with an addendum to update the contract. But as long as both parties sign, both parties have to sign on any changes to the contract, then that is perfectly fine and very common. Old man Jones wants to settle his affairs prior to his death by selling his land and giving all the money to his children. Broker Bob lists the property and markets it. After 6 months, an offer from Widow Smith, who lives in the next county, is received in the mail. Jones immediately signs the contract without change, and Broker Bob drives to the next county to deliver a copy to the widow in person. Which might prevent this from being a binding contract? Is it A, Widow Smith's death before Bob can relate Jones' acceptance? B, either the widow is incompetent or she dies before acceptance can be communicated? C, the widow is incompetent, or nothing? What might prevent this from being a binding contract? Right. The B's in the chat are correct. Again, death or incapacity may make it impossible to form a contract. So if the party is not of right mind, or if they die before acceptance is communicated, there is no contract. Question number 9, Buddy wanted to offer to purchase the Walker's home. He engaged Joan to be his agent. When the offer was delivered to Mr. Walker, it contained a provision limiting the time of acceptance to 48 hours. Mr. Walker rejected the offer out of hand as inadequate, and after thinking about it for 24 hours, called his agent Joan and said, I've changed my mind. I'll take Buddy's offer. What's the status of Buddy's offer? Is it A, it is still open as Buddy has not formally withdrawn it? B, it's still open as it had 48 hours to run? C, it was terminated when it was rejected? Or D, it's a binding contract now that Mr. Walker has accepted it? That's right. This is similar to the counteroffer scenario, but rejection of the offer is termination of the offer. So, you may at some point in your real estate career receive an offer that has an expiration timeline, and you may advise your sellers to not reject immediately, because their doing so would ultimately force a new contract to be drawn up and delivered, should the party still be interested. Which is true of a voidable contract? A voidable contract may be enforceable at the option of the innocent party. B, a forged contract is voidable. C, a signed real estate contract cannot be voided. All parties to a contract must have reached 16 years of age, or it can be voided. What is true with a voidable contract? All right. See the A's trickling into the chat box, and that's going to be correct. Only the injured party or the innocent party can void a contract, but they aren't required to, right? So the most typical example you see here is the minority status of the party, meaning that they are a minor. You have to be 18 years old to enter into a contract. But if somebody were to enter into a contract with a 17-year-old, that 17-year-old could still see the contract through and have it be enforceable as the quote unquote innocent or injured party. If in any way, shape, or form the contract is illegal, then it is going to be immediately voided. All right, an agreement of sale is a contract between A, the seller and the broker, B, the buyer and the broker, C, the buyer and the seller, or D, the seller, the buyer, and the mortgagee. All right. The answer is going to be C. It's going to be between the buyer and the seller. Now, you as an agent representing either party or both is facilitating the contract, but you are not a party in the contract. Neither is the mortgagee, as they are going to be the bank involved, and they have a different relationship. They have no relationship with the seller, only with the buyer. And so in this situation, and listing agreements are between the seller and the broker, buyer-broker agreements between the buyer and the broker, but a sales contract or an agreement of sale is just between the buyer and the seller. All right, a legal remedy that would comply a vendor to execute a deed pursuant to a valid land contract is known as A, the execution of sales, B, specific performance, C, the equity of redemption, or D, a writ of execution. Which one of these would require a vendor? If you don't know, feel free to just put a question mark in the chat box. All right, well, Lisa gave us a D, so we will go with that. And it is specific performance, right? Specific performance is the remedy available to the buyer that would force the seller to execute the deed and specifically perform the promises of the land contract. So a land contract is where you would pay over time and not receive the deed until you had completed the contract, which is different than a purchase money mortgage, where the deed changes hands at the beginning of the contract and is then mortgaged to the bank for the funds provided. So in this case, specific performance is going to be what a buyer with a valid land contract could sue for against the seller. All right. Once both parties have signed a purchase and sale agreement, and the buyer's earnest money check is deposited into the broker's special trust account, whose money is it? Is it A, nobody's until the transaction is either completed, rescinded, or breached? B, the seller's until closing? C, the buyer's until closing? Or D, the broker's as a prepayment of commission? All right, all the A's. That is correct, guys. Earnest money issues will be probably, if you ever encounter any issues in your real estate career, it'll probably be related to earnest money. It is very important to understand that if earnest money goes with the contract, until that contract is accepted by the seller, it's the buyer's money. After the contract is closed and everything is transferred, it's the seller's money. In between, while you're under contract, it is nobody's money, right? It's important that your buyers and sellers both understand that. And then different things can happen from there dependent on completed, rescinded, or breached. And so, keep that in mind until the offer is accepted, the money's the buyer's. After the contract closes, it's the seller's. In between, it's nobody's. Or as you will commonly hear around earnest money, it depends. All right, a meeting of the minds refers to A, offer and acceptance, B, the closing of a contract, C, consideration, or D, consummation of a contract. All right, it is offer and acceptance. One party makes an offer, the other party accepts. This mutual assent is considered the meeting of the minds. All right, Susan offered to trade her 4-bedroom, 3-story townhome near the subway station for John's 1-room cabin in the mountains. John probably accepted the offer. A week later, at Susan's attorney's office, they signed a contract to set forth an even swap. In light of the apparent wide disparity in the values of the two properties, is Susan obligated to fulfill her side of the agreement if she changes her mind before closing? A, no. Susan was under undue influence. B, no. John was taking unfair advantage. C, yes. If all elements of a valid contract are present, the adequacy and equality of considerations is not critical to its validity. Or D, yes, because Susan initiated the transaction. That would be C. Any apparent disparity or gaps in value or adequacy of the consideration, as long as the consideration is considered valuable, is not going to have any bearing on the validity of the contract. All right. So as I mentioned, when we first started, we wanted to go over contracts first. It's one of the most important pieces of your test prep. One of the most important pieces of your test prep. And so I always like to start with that, or at least get that worked in. Kit had thrown out financials, which we will go to next. Is there anything else that we would like to cover this evening? Anything that anyone is struggling with, anything that anyone is uncomfortable with, that would be good to put in our queue for our session this evening? So Tiana says appraisal. I think we can work that in. Math from Ariel, law from Will. Okay, cool. Well, let's go. Kit, can you clarify for me when you say financials, do you mean the real estate calculations, or do you mean financing? Is it just the math that is tripping you up, or is it this everything from a financing standpoint? Math. All right, so let's go with real estate calculations then. I'll cover you and Ariel. Let's just get stuck in here. All right, guys, in the sale of a property, in the sale of 150 foot by 110 foot property at $250 a square foot, the broker's commission is 6%. How much does the owner realize from the transaction? So I'll tell you what, for some of these, I'm just going to work the problem so that we can all see it unfold. If you still want to, I would encourage you to work it yourself, throw an answer in the chat box, but I'm going to go through the progression here. So the first thing we need to determine in a problem like this is, what is the total value of the property sold, since the commission is going to be based off of that total value. So we know that we're selling at $250 a square foot. So how many square feet do we have? Well, 150 times 110, that's the dimensions of the property, is 16,500 square feet. So we know we're selling at $250 a square foot. So the total value of this property would be multiplying that by 2.5. Everybody tracking so far? Then we know that the commission for the broker is 6%. So how much does the owner realize from the transaction? Well, 100% minus 6% is 94%. So let's multiply this by 0.94, and that's going to give us 94%, which in this case is 38,775. Now, the other way that you can do this is you can calculate the 6% off of the total value and then subtract that from the total value. The multiply by 0.94 just allows you to combine those two steps together. Sound good? All righty. a real property transfer fee of 2 mils on the sale of real estate at total consideration of $89,500 equals A, $179, B, $895, C, $89.50, or D, $17.90. So anytime you see the word mills, you want to take the value that they give you and divide it by 1,000. Sorry, mil divide by 1,000. So in this case, 1 mil is $89.50, and we know that we're talking about a property transfer fee of 2 mils. So let's multiply this by 2. That's going to give us $179, and that's going to be correct. Now, one thing to watch out for here is sometimes they'll say assessed value or the assessment rate's 35%. It's 5 mils off that. Anytime you see assessment rate, you're going to want to work that out off the consideration at the start and then apply the millage rate. A broker has 3.75 acres of land listed at 21.5 cents per square foot. The total listing price of this property should be. And guys, if you've been on one of these before, you've heard me say it. You just need to know how many square feet are in an acre. I promise there will be a question on your exam that is going to require that. So we need to know that 43,560 square feet are in an acre. Just got to know it. Then you're going to multiply that by 3.75. And that's going to give you the total number of square feet in the land. And then you're going to multiply that by the cost per square foot, which is 21.5. And that'll be $35,120.25 for the correct answer. 43,560 square feet in an acre. You just gotta know it. A property is appraised at $150,000 and assessed for tax purposes at 35% of the value. Calculate the semi-annual tax bill if the mills total is 80. So this is the exact type of question that I was just referencing. So there's actually going to be 3 steps in this process. 1, we're going to have to get to the assessed value. 2, we're going to have to get to the millage rate. And 3, we're going to have to divide that millage rate by 2 because it is a semi-annual tax bill, right? That's the trick here. It's a dirty one, but you get all wrapped up in these numbers and you miss that it's a semi-annual tax bill, semi meaning twice a year. So first things first, get to assessed value. $150,000 property times 0.35, 35%. So now we know that my assessed value is $52,500. So now I want to take that assessed value and get it into mills. So to do that, I divide by 1,000. From here, I know that my tax bill is a total of 80 mils. So I'm going to multiply this by 80 to get me to 4,200. And then I know that it is a semi-annual tax bill, which means I am going to pay twice a year. So I should divide by 2. And that should be $2,100. Don't forget to divide by 2 as the final step. How's everyone feel about that one? Give me a thumbs up or a tear emoji or something. If that's a tough one. I know that there's a lot of steps, but just remember total value to assessed value to mills, and then just, that's going to be a hard one. Tiana, I feel you. Math can be tough. Here's the important thing to remember. If you master contracts, you master, the top sections of the real estate exam, which I will give those to everybody at the end of this call. You don't have to get a single math problem right to get your real estate license. Okay. But it is important that if you know you're going to struggle with math, let's make sure that we are really dialed in on some of the other big sections. All right, here we go. Property valued at $100,000, taxed at 45 mils. Assessment rate is 35%. Calculate the yearly taxes. So this is 100,000 times 35%. It's going to give us 35,000. Divide that by 1,000. Multiply that by 45. 1,575 is going to be your total, right? And I moved through that one quick just because I know we just looked at a problem like that. All right. A rental property has a return rate of 7.5%. The monthly net rental is $650. What is the market value of this property? So when you get property valuation question like this, it's important to get your net income, right? The net amount of money made in a year, right? Because you have the property value, the net income, or the income, net income, property value, and the rate of return are all in relationship to each other. So if I have $650 monthly, I need to get that into annual income. So I'm going to multiply that by 12, right? That takes 1 month, turns it into a year. Now that I have a year's worth, I'm going to divide by my rate of return, right? When you have annual income, but you don't have value, you divide by the rate of return. Divide by 0.075. That's going to take me to 104,000, right? Now, similarly, if they said this property is valued at $104,000 and has a 7.5% rate of return, what's the annual income? I would multiply the property value times the rate of return. It's how that rate of return is against the total property value, which will then translate to a net income. So value, annual income, and rate of return are always in relationship with one another. Mr. and Mrs. Boyd were approved for an $85,000 loan. Their monthly payment will be $9.75 per $1,000 for 30 years. How much interest will they pay over the life of the loan? So for this one, it's a multi-step process. So we first have to figure out what their monthly payment is. So it's $9.75 per 1,000. Well, there are 85 1,000s in $85,000. So 85 times 975 is going to be their monthly payment. They're going to pay that same monthly payment for 30 years or 360 months. It's very important that we keep our designations the same. If we're looking at monthly payments, we need to multiply by months. If we're looking at annual payments, you can multiply by years. Since we have a monthly payment, we're going to multiply this by 360 months. That's how many months are in 30 years. That then is the total amount of money that they will pay over the life of the loan, but not how much interest they will pay. To determine the amount of interest that we'll pay, we have to back out the principal, right? So now I'm going to subtract the original principal from the loan of $85,000 because them paying that back is completely normal, in which that leaves $213,350. And that's the amount of interest they would have paid over 30 years. Everyone track with that? Everyone feel good about that one? Give me another thumbs up emoji in the chat box. I know that that is a multi-step process. Important that when we're looking at monthly payments, we multiply by months. And then, of course, that we're doing that final step to back out the principal, which is the loan amount. A real estate agent presented an offer in which the buyer asked the sellers to pay half of his escrow fees and his 3 points. The sellers accepted for the home, accepted $195,000 for the home, and the buyer put $55,000 down. How much will the sellers pay for the buyer's points? You see points in a context like this, it is going to be 1% of the total loan amount. 1% of the total loan amount. So if we've got a property that's going to change hands for $195,000, we're going to subtract the down payment, which is going to give us $140,000. Then we're going to multiply that by 1%. That's a point. So times 0.01. And then we have 3 points in play here. So multiply by 3. And that's going to get us to 4,200. Loan amount times the number of points gets you to 4,200. The key here, backing out the down payment, always key. And I promise you on your exam, the version where you do 195,000 times 0.03 will be an answer. And so be careful not to move too quickly. All right, a property owner paid $25 per front foot for a lot of 600 feet by 1,452 feet. How much did he pay for the lot? So front foots are always the first foots. And so we do 600 times 25. That's going to get us to 15,000, which you guys nailed that one very quick. All right, a property sold for $350,000. Its conveyance fee is $2 per thousand. So what's the transfer tax? Conveyance fee, transfer tax, transfer title, all those things are synonymous. And so we have 350 1,000s in 350,000. So we just do 350 times 2. You guys don't need me to do the calculator for that. $700. The most important thing around the math is take the time on the questions to get familiar with what they're asking and ensure that you're getting everything into the same values, right? We're talking years or months, get them in years and months. You're talking square feet to acres, get them all in square feet, so on and so forth. And that will allow you to be a little bit more intentional about the answers to those questions. Trying to see what else I saw. Maybe law. Did somebody throw out law? So let's go with that. When we say law, are we thinking license? That's the license law. Is that what we were looking for, William? All right, let's go. License law and the rules of the Ohio Real Estate Commission. This will probably be our last section. If we can get through all of this, I do want to make sure you all get the breakdown of exam questions because it'll be important for those of you who are getting a little bit anxious about math or one section or another. Really, where you invest your time is really important. A real estate agent listed a property that was vacant. The agent ran a machine to make the room smell good to cover the odor of animal waste. Is the agent obligated to disclose that if not for the machine, the rooms would smell bad? A, no, the agent must only tell the selling broker. B, no, the agent must just never remove the machine. C, caveats emptor says it's the buyer's problem. Or D, if the odor would remain after the machine is removed, then the buyer must be told of pet damage. That is correct. The answer is yes. The agent is aware of a hidden defect, which this would be considered because the machine is being used to mask the smell. Then they must disclose that. Under what condition can an assistant talk with the client about the terms of an offer? A, when the assistant has the authority of the agent. B, when all of the agents are out of the office. C, when the assistant has a license to practice real estate. Or D, when the client does not mind dealing with the assistant. That's right. You want to talk terms of an offer and negotiate offers, you must have a real estate license. What protected group is covered under the Ohio Civil Rights Law, but not under the Federal Civil Rights Law of 1968? Is it A, sex, B, national origin, C, ancestry, or D, handicap? All right, we got some B's and C's, so we feel pretty strongly it's either national origin or ancestry. It looks like the C's are going to have the majority here, and that's going to be correct. While national origin, handicap, and sex are both covered under both statutes, ancestry is a protected class under Ohio civil rights law only. The seller gave her agent a check for getting her house sold so quickly. What must the salesperson do with the check? A, keep the check regardless of the amount. B, give the check back to the seller. C, give the check to his broker. Or D, the agent may keep the check if it is less than $10,000. All right. Seeing all the C's, that's correct. Any commissions or compensations paid to salespeople must be processed through the brokerage. Question number 5. The real estate recovery fund claims are limited to what dollar amount? A, 800, B, I believe that's supposed to be $1 million. They've got some commas out of place. C, 40,000, or D, $2,500. All right, I can't tell where last question C's end and this one began, but $40,000 is the maximum paid in the name of one licensee. $2,500 is going to be a real estate commission fine per violation, could be related to marketing. $800 is the maximum amount of a non-interest bearing loan for pre-licensing classes, and $1 million is the minimum amount that must be kept in the recovery fund. All right, what law requires a broker's license to be placed in close proximity to the federal fair housing poster? Is it A, Ohio licensing law, B, the Federal Fair Housing Act, C, the Ohio Civil Rights Act, or D, RESPA, also known as the Real Estate Settlement Protection Procedures Act? Excuse me. We're a little bit all over the board here. We got B's, D's, an A, but I am seeing 1, 2, 3, 4, 4 D's. We'll go with that. It's actually going to be Ohio licensing law. Good job, Cheyenne. Licensing law requires the broker, Ohio's licensing law requires that the broker's license be in proximity to the fair housing poster hung in the office. An agent told the buyer that that they would have the option of tapping into new sewer when in fact tapping into the new sewer was mandatory. The agent actions violate A, the code of ethics, B, the task force on agency, C, federal law, or D, license law. Which has been violated here? Right, seeing the D's in the chat, we will go with that, and that's correct. Knowingly making misrepresentations is a violation of licensing law. Code of ethics is something that the National Association of Realtors deals with. The canon of ethics would be involving the Ohio Real Estate Commission. Who can be affected by lead poisoning? A, anyone, B, children, C, pregnant women, or D, elderly? Smash those A's, guys. Anyone can be. All right. At what point must earnest money be deposited into the broker's trust account? A, immediately, B, within 48 hours or the terms of the contract, whichever comes first. C, once the offer is accepted, or D, according to the terms of the contract. We're all over here. We got, I think, one for everybody. It's going to be D. So when it comes to earnest money, there's very little that can't happen or must happen as it relates to earnest money. Whatever the contract says is what is going to be required related to earnest money. The only exception to that is that an earnest money check cannot be written in the name of an agent. It must go to the broker, to the title company. It can go directly to the seller. It can go to a separate account. There's a lot of things that can happen to it. Typically, it just goes to the title company and that's that. But it's always per the contract. We always deal with earnest money per the contract. All right, the rate of commission that may be charged on the sale of improved property is A, the rate agreed upon between the buyer and the sales associate. B, the rate agreed upon between the broker and the sales associate. C, the rate agreed upon between the broker and the property owner. Or D, 6%. All right, the C's are going to have this one. So the rate of commission is going to be set by the sales, by the broker that the listing agreement is signed with, right? So that rate of commission is determined by the seller and the property owner and the broker, not the sales associate, not the buyer. It's only between those two because this is the initial contract between buyer and, by the seller and the broker. A seller tells the listing agent that her home was treated for termites a decade ago. Before listing the property, the agent should A, talk to planning and zoning, B, talk to neighbors, C, tell the seller not to disclose the infestation because it was longer than 5 years ago, or D, tell the seller to disclose the old infestation. Yes, it is going to be D. If you're presented with the opportunity to disclose, it will keep you out of a lot of trouble. Question number 12, a seller and broker agree upon a listing that would pay the broker a 6% commission if the broker finds a ready, willing, and able buyer for the seller's home. The broker finds a buyer who meets the seller's term, but the seller refuses to pay the broker's commission. What remedy can the broker pursue? A, file a lien against the seller's residence for the unpaid commission. B, file suit for specific performance. C, sue the seller for the unpaid commission. Or D, file a complaint with the Ohio Real Estate Commission. What do we think it is? All right, seeing the C's in the chat box, that's going to be correct. Brokers' liens, what's described in Section A, are only going to be used in commercial real estate transactions against commercial real property, typically in the form of a lease. And only the buyer can sue a seller for specific performance. So the broker would have to sue for settlement of an unpaid commission. So a little nuance there around the specific performance feels like it should be right. You're requiring them to perform specifically, but that is only in relation to a valid land contract, like we saw when we were doing the contract section. All right, question number 13. A closing occurred on September 30th, 2012. Under Ohio's licensing law, the soonest the broker can dispose of the file is A, September 30, 2019, B, September 30, 2015, C, December 31st, 2012, or D, September 30, 2014. You guys crushed that one. It is 3 years to the day. Got to hold on to the files for 3 years. They cannot be disposed of prior to that. All right, question number 14. The commission shall suspend for a minimum of 2 months or revoke the license of any broker or sales agent found guilty of a first fair housing violation, B, the third fair housing violation, C, the second fair housing violation, or D, the fourth. All right, the C's in the chat box are going to be the winner there. You, on your second fair housing violation offense, it is for a minimum must suspend for 2 months or could revoke the license. All right, question number 15. This will be our last one, and then I want to talk to you about the exam breakdowns. When a broker does not wish a salesperson to continue with his company, the broker, A, must tell the agent and then return the license. B, must send the agent a letter within 3 days of sending the license back. C, is out of luck, the license may not be returned. Or D, must tell the agent 30 days before sending the license back. Right, everyone feels pretty strongly about B, and that is correct. If the broker chooses to return the license, he must tell the agent immediately and also must send the agent a letter within 3 days of returning the license. You're not able to practice real estate if your license is not with a brokerage, so you have to be informed by your broker such that you could find another one. And of course, we think that we'll be able to avoid that with respect to having to send anyone's license back. So stay with me here for a second, team. I'm going to go grab you the exam question breakdown. Let's see. What did I say? The exam questions? Yes. All right. So here is the national portion. Now remember, your exam is in 2 parts. One's first, you have the national portion, which is 80 questions, where you have to get 56 of those 80 questions right. So open up your chat box, take a look at what I just put in there. As you can see, contracts are your single largest section, followed by the practice of real estate, followed by general principles of agency. So those 3 sections alone make up 35 of the 80 questions. So nearly 50% of your exam questions are going to come through those 3 sections. Conversely, leasing and property management will only be 2 of your questions. So don't invest your time, energy, or resources in mastering property management. Right? If you know it, great, it'll help. If you don't, it won't torpedo you, right? And as you can see, financing, 8 questions, but the number of math questions specifically on there are going to show up in that, or valuation. And that is not going to be the majority of your questions. So that's the national portion. You get to miss 24 questions and still be a licensed real estate agent. Let's take a look at the state portion, which is only 3 sections, and it's 40 questions. So for this one, it's tough. You kind of gotta just know. There's not too much to choose from. Conversely, I would say licensing requirements are pretty straightforward. So make sure you know, hey, I need it's 120 hours that you just went through. Your continuing education is 30 hours every 3 years. Your first year post licensing is 20 hours. Like, get that stuff down, because those should be layup questions for you, right? But at the end of the day, there is, especially with the national exam, I would put your time, energy, and resources into contracts, general principles of agency, the practice of real estate, financing, and then that's going to be it. And then whatever you feel like you can do best at, but everything else is going to be in that 4, 5, or 6 questions bucket. So I wouldn't go bending over backwards to sort out land use if you still don't understand contracts. The other important thing is that the practice of real estate and contracts are going to underpin questions in the land use bucket, as well as the valuation property ownership section. So getting those big rocks in place early on, or as you're preparing for your exam, is going to be really, really valuable. Make sense? Okay, great. So again, feel free to copy those out of the chat box. Make sure that you have them. Make sure that you are, focusing on that. I'm going to go ahead and put my email in the chat box, as well as my cell phone number. So if you guys need anything, if you're like, hey, I'm studying and I can't seem to get my head wrapped around this particular thing, just shoot me an email. And I will get back to you, as soon as I can with an explanation if there are questions that are stumping you. And then, of course, prioritize being here every Monday. But also, I want to encourage everybody, don't wait until you feel like you can score 100 on this exam to schedule and take your exam, right? Make sure that you are putting yourself in a position. You are coming off your classes, you're fresh, right? You got all the information in your head. The longer you wait, the more you study won't necessarily correlate to a strong performance on the exam. So I'd encourage you to take it sooner rather than later. And don't worry, if you don't pass, it doesn't disallow you from being a real estate agent. The number of successful real estate agents who took more than one try there are many. How's that? So don't beat yourself up about it, and put the ball in play, so to speak, with getting your exam scheduled. And when you schedule your exam, let myself or Danielle Sullivan with our office know, so that we can send you, some T's and P's and some good vibes on your test day. So does anybody on the call right now have their test scheduled? Do you know when you're taking it? Cheyenne's question: if we submit our application and fingerprinting, how long do we anticipate being able to schedule our exam? So it usually takes a couple weeks turnaround time. Sometimes it's 3 weeks if the state's backed up, or your file gets on a slow person's desk. But if you send everything down today, you should be able to test you should be able to schedule your exam within about 2 to 3 weeks. And the testing centers have availability inside of a week now. So, you're from application to exam, you're probably right around 3 to 4 weeks, depending on how quickly it gets processed. Cool. All right, gang. Well, if anyone has their exam scheduled, shoot me a note or a text and let me know who you are and that you've done that. And otherwise, go ahead and, join us here. Also, you can check out previous versions of our study sessions. If you don't trust yourself to sit there and click through exam questions, you can go on our YouTube training page, Keller Williams Greater Metropolitan Training, and find about a half a dozen of these where we've a half dozen of these where we've recorded our training sessions or our exam prep sessions. You can listen to those, while you're at the gym or out for a walk, if you're really into that sort of thing. And then you can, get to them whenever you want. But please continue to join us on Monday nights, engage, and of course, if you have any questions, you don't have to hesitate to reach out. Okay. All All right, Tanya, we'll get that anxiety under control. Get you your real estate license. Guys, remember 120 hours of education, 100, all of the time and energy and resources that you invested into this. Don't let the test get your goat. When it comes to test taking, it's as much strategy. So strategize and studying the right things. And then when you're taking the exam, you want to make sure that what's great about the exam, they don't tell you this ahead of time, is that you can skip questions and come back to them, right? So you get about 3.5 hours for the total exam. And what will be, what's really great about that is you go through, and I promise you, it happens to everybody. When I took my exam, I sat down, opened up the exam. The first question looked like nothing I'd ever seen before in my life. I mean, it might as well have been in alien text. And then I was like, oh man, like I don't know this. And two things could have happened there. I could have stayed on that question and tried to figure it out and wasted a lot of time, but instead I skipped it. And the second question was something I knew. And the third question was something I knew. And the fourth question was something I didn't. So I skipped it. And so what you do is you maximize your time answering the questions that you know how to answer, answering the questions that you know you can get right. Then once you've done that, you circle back to the ones that you're not sure of. Now, there's a very high percentage chance that one of the questions you knew jogged your memory about one of the ones that you didn't. So now your second time around, you feel a lot more confident about most of the questions you're running into. Then you get to the point where you got 40, 45 minutes left. You got a dozen questions. You invest all of your time remaining in the questions that you need to give the most time to, instead of going through it sequentially and maybe rushing for the last dozen questions that you could have got right because you spent all your time early on the tough ones, right? So just that strategy alone picks you up half a dozen points on the exam. Because if you run out of time during the exam, you get zeros on everything. So you want to give yourself a shot with every single question on the exam. The best way to do that is flag the ones you don't know and skip them until the end. All right, team, that is going to be all for this evening. Thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you back here next week. Same Zoom time, same Zoom channel. Have a wonderful week, everyone, and don't forget to copy down the exam question distribution and all of my contact information. Let's make sure you guys get everything you need to get those real estate licenses, all right? Have a good one, team.